One of the things I enjoy most when developing a campaign world or when tailoring a campaign world to fit the group's goals is coming up with stories. Things that have happened in the past that the characters know about and that have in some way shaped the cultures that they come from or caused the organizations of which they are members to be the way they are. In this installment of our series on RuneQuest and building a campaign and campaign world, that's what we're looking at. Folklore and stories. In the companion blog entry for the last episode, which appeared on my blog, Casting Shadows, I was able to get into some more description about the location of where this sample combat between the Axeman and the Sorcerer was taking place. And this is a location known by several names in different cultures through the area and beyond, but to the two who were fighting within it, it's known as the Desert of Screams. The desert itself is white. The sands glitter in the sunlight like diamonds, and not just like diamonds. The sand actually is diamond chips, diamond dust, diamond particles. And the great winds of the desert drive these hard particles into the stone that rises up all the way across the desert, drilling through it, boring holes, carving it into peculiar and unnerving shapes. And as this wind blows, it comes part and parcel with the sound of screaming, which as you're trekking across the desert can come to sound very much like someone or something screaming. Human culture doesn't have much to say about the gods, even though humans are just as pious as anyone else. But the humans are taking a very the Lord helps those who helps themselves, very practical approach to their worship and their daily lives, in that they are doing everything they can to take care of themselves. And for them, the Desert of Screams, or the Screaming Desert, it is a message from the gods not to take anything at any kind of face value, not to value something for its own inherent qualities, but instead to value what it can do. They tell a story of how at one time diamonds were rare and men would go to great lengths to hoard them. And so the gods have given them their heart's desire, a seemingly limitless desert filled with diamonds, making that particular bit of carbon absolutely useless, except when you consider the diamond's other properties. A closely related culture, the Plenthans, dwellers underground, hard workers, hard lives, stoic culture. They take a very different view of this desert. For them, the Desert of Screams is filled with the shattered, crystallized souls of their brethren who stood with a group of deities that they call the fallen gods, and they stood against the forces of chaos, as particularly embodied by something which they speak of in hushed tones as the chaos worm. They do not enter the desert. They see it as a cemetery, and should they be required to pass through this desert, it's not unlike a crisis of faith. Not to the point where we have weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth, but like those religions with dietary restrictions or with strict rules which apply to how you live your daily life, entering this desert breaks one of those rules. As counterpoint, the blessed, or the blessed. Remember, these These beings are, for all intents and purposes, immortal, touched by the gods, and left in the earthly realm as an example of what pleases the gods, and they are to dwell there forever. And their story is that the diamonds in the desert are actually the remnants of tears shed by the first of their kind as she realized how many ages had passed between her becoming blessed and the disappearance of everything and everyone that she knew as a mortal. And only after this did the gods relent and find more beings worthy of their blessing. Now, I'm not a big fan of exposition as a game master. I much prefer to be reacting to and interacting with what the players are doing and saying and thinking. Now, there's a lot of things that you will always have to describe as a game master, and you'll have to do that proactively in order to set a scene or in order to give the players enough information to actually do something. It's not enough to say you walk into a house. As we described with the Plenthans earlier, crossing into the desert is seen as disrespectful in their culture, strongly disrespectful, so that there are many who will not consider it or who will only do it under duress. How about your character? Is your character one who will just ignore this social rule, or one that will argue bitterly with the party about there needing to be some other way that they can go? Where between those two extremes does your character fall? Supporting all of this is one of the truly fantastic and strangely unique aspects of RuneQuest, which is the notion of cults. And while not all cults will actually be, cults like we think about them, these are organizations who are getting together for some sort of purpose. And like any organization, they turn into a self-defining group. So whatever goal that they had when they initially got together has become a legend, or has become folklore, or has become enshrined in some sort of doctrine, so that it is in some way, it's one step removed from whoever it was that founded the cult actually felt. It's what they were able to communicate. And these kinds of differences between the upper echelons of a cult and the lower echelons of the cult, and the way that they see their membership and what it is they're actually trying to accomplish, is a really, kind of exciting thing to get into as you start building your governments or building the social order, and then thinking, well, what kind of groups would there be in here? And we're talking about things like the Rotary Club, the Lions, the Better Business Bureau, the Masons, the Order of the Golden Dawn. All of these different things are in some way things that you can build out of the rules in RuneQuest, which support cults. And one of the earliest decisions that you'll make as a player in RuneQuest is, do I join one or not? There are incredible benefits for being a member of what I'll keep calling cults, but are organizations of some kind within the cultures that your characters are drawn from. For the magical characters, the sorcerers, the shamans, and these sorts of things, these organizations often represent the way in which your character develops in their calling or chosen profession. How do sorcerers get that way? They either uncover an awful lot of lore on their own, or they serve, right, in order to be taught. How do shamans get that way? Someone guides them. Right? Long periods of sacrifice, or they're taught, they're awakened into this wider spiritual world. There are many ways to get where you're going in RuneQuest, and cults are just one of them. But cults are a really rich way to build into the tapestry of your world and create layers of truth and reality inside that world that might otherwise be missing in a less well-developed framework for fantasy. As I move closer and closer to the completion point for the planning stage of this campaign, one section of lore that I'm focusing on is what terrible event has just happened. Because, you know, in our world, there's always a terrible event. In this particular week, there have been numerous earthquakes, and hundreds of people have lost their lives, and many hundreds more have been hospitalized. And this is just natural disasters. The disasters that we wreak on each other they're not even reported anymore. So in this world where chaos is literally eating at the gates, where deities both malign and benign are forcing people to live their lives in particular ways and adhere to certain codes, and shadowy cults and government groups and shadow governments and noble organizations and just brother against brother and sister against sister, all this crap is going on. What kind of disaster has recently happened? And one of the things that I had mentioned in an earlier clip is that there's a very strong sense that something has happened to the Phaedrons, not just to the people, but to their entire culture. And developing the background lore about how some of the NPC cultures will respond to that news is exactly what we're talking about here. Who is going to feel that small glimmer of satisfaction that this group of lascivious sailors on the seas of pleasure, you know, have gotten their just desserts? Who will feel real sadness at the simple mortal tragedy of the death of a city? And why?